All right, I just started the video, so let's pretend like I'm starting the lesson now. All right, welcome to Classes and Objects. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to build classes and objects using Ruby. So we're using the Ruby building assessment right now, which has these things. Hopefully you've given this first one a shot. Initialize a Ruby class with those things. So let's do it together. I go over to this folder. I'm going to clone this down. Cool. So I hop over to that folder. I got the README and an AppRB file. All right, what's in that AppRB file? Nothing. Nothing up this sleeve, nothing up this sleeve. So if I open that up, man, how am I going to start this? You can give me an idea. Yeah.
Create a class for building.
Okay.
Yeah, capital B, put an N down there.
Good.
And get a method inside there to initialize it.
How do I do a method?
DEF initialize. Inside of those parentheses, you'll put the parameters, or let's say the attributes that you want to initialize.
So name, address, number of floors, number of tenants. Okay?
I had done an attribute reader above that with all those things. I don't know if that's necessary or not.
Not yet.
And then, down in the function, you'll have another end. And then in there, it'll be app name, people's name, app address.
Ah, I see.
For each one. And that way it can kind of be accessed outside of visualize.
Okay. All right. So it initializes with a name, address, number of floors, and number of tenants. Done. That's that first step. Not the accessors yet. It is initializing with those things. So let's talk a little bit more about this. Some of you may have used the parentheses here. Most Ruby people don't, just FYI. If you do that does the exact same thing. JavaScript requires the parentheses. Most languages do. Rubyists tend to leave them off. Just an FYI. Initialize, huh? Weird. Why did I call it initialize and not new or start or app or whatever? Why did I say initialize? Other thoughts on that?
Is every time you call .new, isn't initialize like the set method for that already?
Exactly. It's built-in Ruby magic. Whenever I call building.new, that's the function that runs. That's the method that runs. Why didn't they call it new? I don't know. They called it initialize. Yeah.
Why don't they have, I think I don't answer this question, but why don't they have, I think it's called meta programming for initialize already, if it's going to be understood, define it and build it?
You mean that I'm going to basically do this?
Yeah, like for example, like attribute assessor, it would just be like, I don't know, attribute initialize, and it does all that stuff for you.
Sure. So some of it is that we still want the flexibility of this. That's a great question. And my accessors and readers and writers, they don't have to be only things that I initialized with. Those can be things that got added later, tons of other stuff. And so, for example, I might have one that's like adder accessor is rented. I maybe don't initialize anything to that originally, and when I make some building with whatever things in it, and then I do some building dot is rented, that'll tell me whether or not that's been set, and then I can set that equal to true, even though I didn't initialize it to anything. Totally fair game. Other questions about anything we've done so far? Yeah.
Can you also, instead of just initialize, can you do other stuff in there, in initialize?
Yep.
Like, I know, other than like default name stuff, but like, I don't know.
Mhm.
Maybe automatically push one to an array or
Yep.
something?
You can call function or call other methods. You can calculate things. You can do whatever you want. It's just a method body. A lot of the time, this is all you'll see in it, but that's all it has to be. It can be whatever else. Great example of that, as you'll start working on with Damon today. We have a class variable that we set to an empty array, and every time we make a new one, we shovel that new thing into that array. Totally common. Other questions about anything we've done so far? Yeah.
Do you have to pass all the, like, is it a one-to-one match from names being passed, and arguments being passed into the list of class variables, or can you just set a class variable?
Instance variable. Let's be careful about that.
Sorry, thank you.
Yep. So if I pass in these four things, the way that I've written this now, I have to call new with four things. I can't do it with three. I can't do it with five. The order of them, written this way, matters when I'm calling new. This body, though, that's fine. I can do these in whatever order I want. I also don't have to do anything with them. But if I say let's see, what's this place called? The Hub. If I want to make a new building for that, the Hub, Walnut Street, 7 floors, I want to say. Number of tenants, it's probably 700 people in the building. That's legal. If I do those in a different order, I'm probably not going to get what I'm expecting. If I do that, it's going to throw an error. If I don't put any of them in, that's going to throw an error. What if I wanted to make number of tenants optional?
Default value?
Default value. How do I do default value?
Equals in your original attribute.
Mhm.
Initialize it there.
Sure. I can initialize it to 1,000 or something. And now I'm not required to pass this one in. I can pass 3 or 4 arguments in. Note, though, that when I do that, that has to be last. I can't have optional arguments in the middle, or optional parameters in the middle of that declaration. Has to go at the end. But I can have as many as I want. Other questions so far?
Yeah, can you only have one optional
Nope.
variable? So if you had two
Mm-hmm.
at the end that you were setting default values for,
Mm-hmm.
how do you know when you're like on line 8?
Yep.
If you were to just pass exactly where the 7 is,
Mm-hmm.
how does it know which one you're?
They're still in order.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Okay, so just all of them. That makes sense.
Yep.
Why, how they're on the end, what if you wanted a default value for address instead of the others, you would have to move it to the end, the address?
Yep.
Okay.
What if you wanted to pass in a value for a number of tenants, but
Not number of floors. Can't do it this way. You could use named parameters. Those don't have an implicit order to them. That's fine. But not like this. Cool. Other questions?
So if you have
Exactly. And also, I still have it available, just like I passed it in as an argument. Pretty cool. Other questions? Neat. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to get caught up to this. If you weren't there already, get caught up. Also, if you want to run it, Ruby app.rb. Oops. You need to require in pry and then run binding.pry at the end. And then Ruby app.rb. And now I can take a look at the hub. See my object. All right, so next. The name and number of tenants should be readable and writable. The address should be readable, and the number of floors should not be readable or writable. On your own, give these next three a shot. Go. Another 30 seconds. Cool. So, first one, name and number of tenants should be readable and writable. I'm going to call on somebody. Lily, what you got for me?
I put the, I don't know, like the accessor.
Yeah.
So you just format it as the, how do you, is there a word for it, ATT?
Adder.
Adder?
Mm-hmm.
Accessor?
Adder, accessor, and then what?
Colon.
Mm-hmm.
Name.
Yep.
And then,
And then number of tenants, right?
yeah.
Cool. So this is that meta programming we were talking about. I've made an accessor for name and number of tenants. You do them outside of the, inside the class. come on. But outside of this initialize method. Now, adder accessor is secret code for adder reader and adder writer. So I could say both of these or just this one, those mean the same thing. Furthermore, I could say def name, return name.
This is in lieu of?
In lieu of. I'm giving you 3 different ways of doing the exact same thing. That's what Ruby excels at. So these are what? Readers or writers? Readers. If I want to do the same things as writers, I throw equals on the end. And then that takes in some number, and I just assign it.
Those are writers?
Those are writers. Writers, readers, writers, readers, writers, and readers. Exact same thing, 3 different times. Yeah.
Is, or, how do I ask the question? Is initialize like a default writer?
No. Initialize is how we make an object from a class. A class is a cookie cutter. An object is a cookie. We'll talk more about that in a sec. Yeah.
Is there any benefit as to using adder over, defining it longer?
Yeah, it's way fucking smaller. And like, given the way that I wrote this question, the name and number of tenants should be readable and writable.
Yeah.
Just do that. There's no like points for being verbose about it.
So,
Yeah.
reverse question, so a purpose to being verbose.
Yes. So let's say it wasn't just this. If, well, the name is actually these 3 attributes combined. Then you got to write a reader for it. Or, yeah, this is calculated in some way. You're going to have to like write this out by hand. But if all you're doing is this, we got a macro for that. Yeah.
How would you make, like, number of tenants should only be an integer, for example, like not a float? Is there a way to, like, calculate type or something?
With just pure Ruby, actually, I'm going to throw this to Kat. If I wanted to make sure that, if I wanted to type check something, would I write a writer and then type check it there? Is there a built-in language way to do that?
You'd be like if you need it to be an integer, but they might input a string.
Correct.
I usually just put in the initializer, like number of floors equals number of floors dot
2i.
Yeah.
There you go. And then if it's not castable to that, so like if you do the string 2, you could cast that to a number. Or if you give the number, then it's just the number. But if it's something that couldn't be done with that, like true or something, then throws an error. Yeah, that'd be a way to do it.
I know it's kind of a silly question, but I just want to make
Yeah.
sure before I jump too deep. Can you explain more about the writing and reader?
Yeah.
How they work?
Absolutely. So part of what we're doing with classes and objects is we're making it so that the state of the object, that we're controlling who has access to that, what they can do. So some stuff I want to be part of the state of the object, like number of floors, but I don't want anybody to be able to read that. I don't want anybody to be able to change it, but maybe I still want to be able to use it in calculations, for example. So that doesn't have a reader or a writer. Name of the building, that might change. And also needs to get used. So I say, all right, if you want to read the name of this building, I'm going to let you do that. I'm also going to let you change it if somebody sells it, for example. But the readers and writers, you can't see these things. Like I can't do the hub at name or the hub at address or anything like that. All I can do on an object is call methods. And those methods can tell me what the state is. Those methods can change the state, but I can't ever see it directly.
Thank you.
Yep. Other questions so far? Yeah, there's no like the hub at name or something. That's not a thing. Cool. So that was our accessor. Address should be readable. Add a reader. Love it. And then number of floors should be neither readable nor writable. Do nothing. We're fine. All right, so this one's tricky. The class should keep track of all buildings that are created. So let's distinguish again between the class and the instance. This is the class. This is an instance of the class. I have this building cookie cutter that I can make individual cookies out of. And those cookies can have different decorations. This one's got sprinkles, this one's got frosting, this one's plain. These are objects. But all of them have arms and legs and heads. Or they all have names, they all have addresses, even though their names are different, their addresses are different. So we say they have the same shape because they were made with the same class. So, challenge, yep.
So on .new, we use that because we're creating a new instance
Mhm.
of that? Okay.
Dot new is how you make an instance of a class. It's how you use the cookie cutter. Yep.
Does every new instance have to have those same 4 parameters?
The way that I wrote this, all 4 of these are required. I can't make one without passing those in. So this next challenge, keeping track of all the buildings that are created. Ooh. So now we have to have the instances kind of relate to the classes in some way. And by the way, this is exactly where the like cookie cutter metaphor kind of falls apart. It's like, yeah, it's a cookie cutter, except the cookie cutter also has its own kind of things that go along with it. But we got to get these two things to talk to each other somehow. I'm going to give you a minute to figure that out. Go. All right. Was anybody able to figure it out?
Maybe.
All right. Give me a shot.
So maybe within class, you
Uh-huh.
define a local variable.
Okay.
For instance, so not within initialize yet, but outside of the initialize definition, maybe I could like have building ID and set it to 0. And then like assign that
Okay.
somehow, and then have a building ID plus plus or building ID plus equals 1 at the end of it.
Okay.
Even though that will, I don't know if that formatting works in Ruby, I have no clue.
I don't know if it does either, actually.
Yeah, but I know that plus equals, okay. Yeah, that's, but then I think I need to like assign it inside that initialize method though on the line above where I'm incrementing. Like, so under the number of tenants line, if I could maybe like somehow assign the current building ID to that instance, I don't know though. That's my,
You're in the ballpark.
okay.
All right, gang in the back, be with us. What's up? What do you got?
Oh, me? Yeah. Okay. Some kind of like class variable that can carry between classes.
Ooh, class variable. Let's talk about class variables versus instance variables. So, an instance variable goes on the cookie. Class variable goes on the cookie cutter. Interesting. So our instance variables have ats in front of them. Our class variables have two ats. So I could do something like at all and initialize it to an empty array. Interesting. Yeah, Miwa.
Can it be called anything, or
Yep.
is it always all?
Every one of Cool. So I have a class variable. This is not owned by any building. This is owned by every building. Can also be seen by every building.
Is it usually all?
It's usually all. Yeah.
What about, the difference between, I think they're called global variables, defining a global variable inside a class, as opposed to like, for example, when I was trying to do it, I would have buildings in all caps is equal to like some array or whatever, versus, an instance class. What's the difference between these?
Sure. So if you did a global variable, that can be seen all over the application. That's not owned by building or the hub or anything. That's the entire application at that point.
Even if you defined it inside class building?
This is the equivalent of that.
Okay, okay,
This is like a global variable for a class.
okay, that solves that question, thank you.
Cool. So got every one of them. Now what?
In initialize question.
Yes. So I can say at every one of them. I can shovel in. What do I shovel in? This is where we start getting weird. Name of the building. So if I do that, that'll work. And check this out. If I do the lab, which is on Platt Street, had 5 floors with 500 people in it. And I run this application, check this out. I go, cool, do I have, come on man. Do I have the hub? I have the hub. Do I have the lab? I have the lab. What about building dot, well, let's just look at building. Cool, I got a class called building. Every, oh shoot, you know what I didn't do? I have this class variable. What did I not do? Not call it. Yeah, Adam.
You gotta define a variable that can read it, or I'm sorry, define a method.
Method that can read that.
Yes.
Because I can't do building at every one of them. I have to have some method that's giving that information to me. So, any guesses how I do that?
You add a reader or.
Not really.
Within define self.all.
Self.all. And then, interesting. These don't have to match. That's another instance where you might not use the built-in macro if, for whatever reason, I can't think of a good one, but your variable name and your method name aren't the same, because they don't have to be. So if I do that and run the app, and I look at building.all, all right, I'm keeping track of both of them, but I'm keeping track of the names of the buildings, not the buildings themselves. The name is just one part of the building. How do I get all of it? Ooh, what was that? Holy shit. I wonder what happens now. Building.all. Oh! I am keeping track of all the objects, Mom! Your boy can keep track of his objects.
So self is that a Ruby method?
So, this is a good question. Self is probably one of the trickier things that you'll do this week. So if this isn't immediately obvious to you, don't worry. But I'm using self two different ways here. And in Ruby, there are two different ways to use self. Inside of an instance method, I'm going to say this a couple times, don't worry. Inside of an instance method, self refers to the instance. Inside of an instance method, self refers to the instance. If I do def initialize, if I do def name, if I do def calculate my shit, those are all instance methods. And every time I use self in there, I'm referring to that instance, that cookie, the hub, whatever. Outside of an instance method, like here, I'm not in an instance method, I'm just kind of in the class at this point. Self refers to the class. So here, it's talking about building. The hub doesn't have an all method. Building does. So if I run this, the hub, still alive and well, the hub.all. It's because it's defined on the building, not any instance of the building.
So as long as if it's in the class, it's referring to that class, and
Yes.
in the instance just that instance.
And if it's in an instance method, it's referring to the instance. Yeah.
What is .all referring to?
.all is just something I made up. I could have also called this every one of
Oh, and you were saying they didn't have to match.
They don't have to match. By convention, that's actually self.all, that's add@all, and this one's all. They just don't have to be. That's how you'd normally write it. But it's made up. That's not like initialize, which is magic Ruby shit. All is just a convention.
So as far as self goes, how else would you use it other than like saying like def self to refer to the class? I don't know if that makes sense.
Like here. So for the class, this is exactly how you use it. If I wanted to find methods that exist on the class, but not any particular instance of the class, it's self dot whatever the method name
That's
is.
the only way you can call self on a class.
I'm going to put an asterisk on this because I'm about to tell you a lie, but if you believe this lie for the next 15 weeks, you will have a happy, healthy career. Yes.
And then I guess the reverse would be true, the asterisk, that if it's inside the method, that's really the only time you're going to refer to. Okay. That makes sense.
If you've ever written like a C-style language before, self is this. If you've written JavaScript, though, this is the most complicated part of JavaScript. It's actually not that complicated in Ruby. Frankly, it's not that that complicated in most languages. It just happens to be super complicated in JavaScript. It's either the instance or the class. If it's inside of instance method, it's the instance. If it's outside of that, it's the class. Yep.
So when we call, say, building later on,
Mhm.
because of our attribute accessor and attribute reader, we can only see, outside of binding.pry, we
Mhm.
can only see the name, number of attendants, and addresses, but
Yep.
we'll still be able to do functions and calculations on all the other stuff.
Correct.
Okay.
You got it. Even though I'm not exposing number of floors to anybody who's using it, at number of floors is available in any instance method. It's not available in here because what instance am I referring to? There's no like at name, which building? We're talking about the class because it's a class method. No way of knowing. Yeah.
Can you update whether a instance variable can be accessed by reading or writing?
Like after,
After it's already, the class has already been defined in the code?
I don't think so. Kat, do you know? Can you define methods after you've, at runtime?
That's a great question.
I don't think you can.
I don't think so.
There are languages where that's possible. I don't think this is one of them. Yeah.
This is crazy hypothetical question. So
Mhm.
like, here we're like creating classes, but let's say like built-in classes, and how many if I'm
Mhm.
not understanding this right, like integers, would that be a class?
Integer is a class,
Integer.
and one is an instance of the integer class.
So are there built-in methods to kind of like, how would you find class methods on like integers themselves?
Cool. Great question. The like real answer is what?
Google.
As well, and Google will send you to the docs. There we go. Also, oops, didn't like something I just did.
Line 4, you gotta change every one of them to all, I think, maybe?
Yeah. All right, so integer. Yep, that's a thing. Integer. What methods you got? All those.
So
Those are all the things that I can call.
in the code, could you create a method for integers to call all integers? Just like, I don't know why.
Oh, like that's called monkey patching.
Okay.
Don't worry about it. So like if there's a built-in like Ruby class, you can actually like add methods to it. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Cool. Other questions so far? Yeah.
So what makes self, the class method is because of the double at? Or is it because of where it's at within the class?
Self is not a class method. Self is a like Ruby keyword. What it points to changes based on where it's used. Instance, class. Instance, class. Because that's in an instance method and this isn't. Yeah.
So on that note, like, could you explain why the at all is above it,
Mhm.
and then why it's in it, and then
Yeah.
I kind of feel why it's
Sure. So initialize, this is an instance method, right? It's only owned by the hub and the lab. Add at all is a class variable that's owned by building. So it would make sense that it goes inside the class, but not inside any particular instance method of that class.
just the open variable.
But it can be seen by instance methods. An instance can see the class. A class can't see any one instance. So here, I'm inside of a class method. Obviously, a class method can see a class variable as well. So that's how we're using it those 3 different ways. Other questions about this? Yeah.
Why do you write out the at thing?
You mean like this? Like what would happen if I got rid of this?
Now, if you just write out all, not have at
Oh.
up top, like in the.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Just like this?
Yeah.
So if I do that, now it's not a class variable anymore, it's a local variable. And so I think those die as soon as this is constructed. And so what'll happen is this will initialize, this will get pushed into there, and then it will go away. And so the next time I call it, it reinitializes to an empty array. So if I want it to stick around, that's why I do it that way. Yeah.
Is there like a word for describing whether an instance variable is readable or writable? Like, is there a word for like those controls?
Accessors.
Just accessors.
You say getter, setter, and then both of those together are accessors. Yeah.
I still don't get why that class variable all is inside the initialize.
This?
Why do we need that?
Because the instructions were to keep track of all buildings that are created. So this is an instance method, but it can see class variables. If I want to keep track of every one that I made, I can shovel everyone as I make it into that array. And so I call new twice here. Each time I go, cool, make a new building. Assigns those instance variables. Also, this empty array shovels in the hub. Makes a new one. Assigns the instance variables. We get to here, and it goes, cool, I have an array with one thing in it. I'd like to shovel this new one that I just made. And now, after that's done, now I can call building.all and see that.
That self should be used as building, because self is building.
Yes.
Self
Yes.
is class.
The first time we call this, self is the hub. The second time we call this, self is the lab.
And then dot all means all the self instances.
Yep. Because I'm keeping track of them. So these next three are where this kind of seemingly unrelated shit to like what we did in the first part of the week and a lot of stuff you did in your pre-work, this is where they start coming together. Because if I run this app and I say, all right, cool, so I've made the lab, made the hub, I'm keeping track of all of them. Well, wait a minute. Building.all, that's an array. What kinds of things can I do with arrays? Array methods. What if I wanted to get the name of every building? Building.all. What would be the appropriate enumerable for that? Dot each or map? You can do it with each. But if I'm trying to take an array of 2 buildings and get an array of 2 names, that's a map.
Because the map is return exactly the same thing.
Yes. So I say map, do, and then the thing that I pass, each one of these is a building. Helps if I spell it right.
All this works in private too.
Yep. And then for each building, I want to get building.name, and I get an array of names. I can also reduce the number of tenants to like sum them or something like that and get the total number of tenants. I can each do them and do anything I want. I can put some, I can do whatever. They're just arrays. Yeah.
I think you may have answered this, but I just want to reiterate. Every time you call, hold on, an instance, like as you called it right there,
Mm-hmm.
is it treating it like a Or
Nope.
What is an instance as far as like,
It's an object. Instance and object mean the same thing. Building.all, building's a class. It has a class method called all that poops back an array of every instance that I've made. Arrays all have map. The thing that goes in the pipes there is each individual thing in the array. The individual thing in the array is an instance. It's an object. So I have access to that in the body of this block. And since that's an object, I can call that object's methods. So like I have this name getter that came in from the accessor thing. If I return that out of the block like this, that object becomes this string.
I see, so it's just like a new way of storing different information too, because I thought you would have to like create a hash and then push all the individual instance variables into a hash and do it that way, okay.
Nope. It's just a data type like anything else. We have strings, we have booleans, we have integers, and we have objects. Yeah.
So does that mean if you were to do like dot none of floors, we wouldn't get anything? We wouldn't think it's useful?
Exactly. Yeah, let's take a look at that. So I map through that. I do number of floors. I call that method undefined method number of floors because I didn't make a getter for that. Meanwhile, number of tenants, I did. So I could do number of tenants, and then get an array of those back. I can also reduce it, I can filter it, I can do whatever. And just as importantly, I can do all of that kind of shit in these methods also. So if I want average tenants per floor, I need to know about multiple buildings for that. So that's probably going to be a class method. So I can do def self average tenants per floor. And then I could do something like add all, take everything, and I want to, let's say I want to sum those. So I'll say all reduce, start with 0. This is going to be total floors. So I'm going to reduce, and this takes in a sum and a building, and returns, so we'll say sum equals sum plus building dot number of floors. And when this is done, I should have the total number of floors. Then I could do total tenants and do the same thing with number of tenants. Oh shoot, you know what? It won't let me do that. Ha. Anybody tell me why?
You didn't make it readable?
I didn't make it readable. So if I throw that into the reader, and it's because I'm in the, I could see it in an instance, I can't see it in a class method. Interesting. All right, so I do that, and then I return total tenants divided by total floors, and that should give me the average number of tenants per floor. See if it works. Building average, come on, man. Building average tenants per floor, 100. This is our regular enumerable stuff, except we can also do it with objects, and arrays of objects, and whatever else, because they're just data types. Yeah?
well, what happens if you call like, self as the class, in a sense, as the class, like def, self, whatever, and then you call self inside of that?
Still the class. Great question. Inside of this, self is the class because it's a class method. Same here. It can't be an instance because what instance? Inside of an instance method, this is the instance. Everywhere else is the class. Cool. Any other questions?
So initialize is an instance method. Are there like other instance methods we should know about now, or?
Not right now.
Okay.
That's the only magic one you need to worry about.
Okay.
There's other ones like that methods one that I did that lists out all of an object's methods. There's plenty of those that are built in. This is the only one you need to like override. Cool. Yeah.
I'm getting a little confused. So is,
What? But this is also straightforward.
so an instance is like a method?
An instance is an object.
An instance is an object.
Those two words mean the same thing.
Okay.
Instance and object.
So when we're writing the methods, they can be instance methods?
Correct. So
Methods off of that, where we initialize, or are those totally different? I'm confused with initialize.
classes can have class variables.
Yeah.
They can have class methods. And they can make objects. Objects can have instance variables, instance methods.
And the initialize is off of the class?
Initialize is,
The method of initialize?
it's an instance method. I mean, all these get defined inside of this class.
Okay.
But yeah, that's an instance method. Well, this is technically not. Because you call it on building, but don't think too hard about it. Other questions?
Can you scroll down a little bit on
Mhm.
the self-average tenants per floor? I had done a similar thing, except my bottom line was the total tenants divided by self.all.count. And when I got binding pry in there, one time I did self.all.count, it did come back with an integer, and
You did self.all.count, like that.
yeah, I thought that would give me that array and the number of items in it.
That's exactly what it does. However, what is self.all giving me an array of?
Array? All the buildings.
What was it?
All the buildings?
Buildings. So that's the number of buildings there are, not how many floors each one has. That's why we can't do that.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to find out,
Tenants per floor on average, not tenants per building. That would work for tenants per building. Also, check this out. This seems real handy. What if we made it a helper? Def total floors. We'll keep the end there. Cool. Now I can do self.total floors. Sick. Other questions? So beautifully small. Yeah.
So floors shouldn't be readable.
I know, but that's because the guy who wrote it's a idiot who didn't actually do the assessment. Yeah, you can add a reader for that. Cool. What else? Have a hearty munch. See ya.